Hello. Welcome to the Weather Skool podcast, where we dive into the world of meteorology, but with a twist. This isn't just about weather forecasts and storm tracking. We're here to hear the stories behind the meteorologists themselves. You'll get to know the people who bring you the weather every day, what drives them, what challenges they've faced, and how their personal journeys shape the work they do. If you're passionate about weather or curious about the lives of those who predict it, you're in the right place. So jump in as we explore the people behind the forecasts and discover what makes meteorologists truly unique. Welcome to Weather Skool, and this is the Weather Skool Podcast Project.
Hey, Justin Kiefer here from the Weather Skool Podcast Project, and I am happy to introduce and welcome to the project Danielle Kelly. Danielle is a meteorologist, amongst other things, in her hometown where she lives right now in Tallahassee, Florida. Danielle, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. We got a lot to go over regarding your meteorology, weather, and other careers. But first off, just thanks so much for joining me, and we really appreciate you being here.
Well, thank you. And thank you for starting this project and this podcast. I love it. I've watched the stories and it's just fascinating. And it's really, really awesome to get to see the stories behind the scenes, what got us into this field and things like that. And it's been wonderful. So I thank you.
I appreciate those kind words. We want to hear your story because it's both a unique one and for me inspiring, because I just love the way you take on some things out of your business and in your life. First, I'm going to kind of hit some of the high points. I need you to fill in for, what you're doing right now. And if I'm leaving out anything, but I know that you're a meteorologist, a chief meteorologist for online and some broadcast entities. You're also a lawyer,
Yes.
and also a full-time mom. And,
Yes.
and I just find you to be sort of fierce and fearless, but compassionate and kind all at the same time. And from our brief time of knowing each other and watching you work, if I've left anything else out, please kind of fill us in on what's going on in your life right now.
What's going on now? I do radio broadcasting for WVFT and WAKU here in Tallahassee. Those are the two stations I record for. WVFT is owned by Magic Broadcasting, so I also record for areas in Panama City. That started back in 2017, actually when I was in school, and my station manager, Doug Apple over at WAKU said, "Hey, you're studying this stuff. I need somebody to do forecasts, on the radio." So I was like, okay. And this was good practice for me, at the time where you're learning how to do this, in school. So I started doing that. Then I joined Real Talk 93.3, that's WVFT, when Michael hit. They put me on in Panama City on their stations over there as well. So I stuck with that. And now I do the morning show here. And I'm on drive time at afternoon, I think. So I'm on the radio aspect of it. That was a long-winded answer.
Yeah, no. It's great to, so that's one aspect. I believe you also produce and put out a ton of on-air digital and I guess live to digital on some of the social media sites as well out there.
Yes, I do. We actually had, when I started all this, because I originally enrolled in Mississippi State in 2000 when I was in law school. That's a long story. We'll get into how I got into meteorology. But in 2017, when I decided to go back, honestly, and it's part of what shapes my career is those single events that, that shape your life. I have my own that happened to me as a child. But 2017, we had the tornado outbreak in Albany and Adel. And I felt just helpless. And I was like, this has always been my calling. This is what I was supposed to do. I didn't do it. And, so now I'm going to go back and I'm going to do it. We had a Facebook group, Southeast Area Severe Weather, with a weather team. They were all certified storm chasers and stuff like that through the Tallahassee National Weather Service office. And we would issue warnings. We would do text alert services and get texts out, the little green texts that actually go through when apps may drop or other things may happen. And we were, getting texts out routinely for warnings and things like that, having meetings, getting through, who's going to think what's going to happen, and and you need that kind of team. You need that kind of, especially with me being in radio in Tallahassee by myself. They're not in Tallahassee, but you can't check your instincts at the door, and you need that kind of input. My team member Keith Jackson always jokes with me. He's from Kentucky, so he's very observational meteorology, and he'll say, just look for buzzards in an updraft, then you know what's going to happen. Things like that. He's like, nature is smart, just because the models aren't telling you something. So it's a joke between us. I'm like, is this a buzzards in an updraft moment, or is this something else? So, but no,
I like that one. Up here where I live, it's the color of the woolly bear caterpillar, but I'll start looking for buzzards at updrafts real soon. That'll be my next tip. That's kind of fascinating. I mean, a lot of people that I've talked to and that I will talk to, their meteorology career starts and ends, well, as far as education, begins and ends very quickly. They're in and out of college. They're on to their first job doing weather somewhere, whether it's radio or writing or television. And yours was not somewhat of a linear path. It sounds like, if you began it in 2000 and then you jump back in when that weather event kind of spurred or got your sensations back up, is, what, this is what I need to do. So let's we're going to come to that moment in 2017. Let's kind of go back a little further than that, and let's talk about, because a lot of people that I've talked to, and I'm included, as children, had a keen interest or a desire, or weather was kind of a thing. And so I really like to start there with everybody. All my guests is like, was that something in your childhood where weather was important to you? And I guess, how was where'd you grow up? What was your childhood like?
Well, okay, that's actually a perfect question, because that's where this all started. I grew up in Tallahassee, born and raised in Tallahassee. What happened to me? 1985 happened to me. I had a babysitter that would watch us after school and stuff, and she took us somewhere around the Appalachia Parkway area, so she could get her hair done, and we were all there. And next thing I know, this woman runs in and says, "My husband's a meteorologist. There's a tornado on the ground. Take shelter now." Well, I'm screaming and crying because I'm already an anxious child, and you're telling, I have to understand things, or like, you can't just scream at me. Like, you have to explain something. And I was like, "What is a tornado?" And I remember one of the ladies hugging me and said, "It's just a big thunderstorm. It's going to be okay." But that wasn't enough for me. I needed to understand. And then Hurricane Kate hit on my birthday that year, actually. My 9th birthday, Hurricane Kate hit, and that was a very long night in Tallahassee.
Yes, it
My
was.
father worked Florida Highway Patrol. He was one of Bobby Bowden's escorts on field during the football game. So I grew up here around the FSU program, and he was working that night, and he worked for the Florida Marine Patrol and the Department of Environmental Protection. So he was often gone to these storms. Like, he would have to leave in the middle of them to go establish the command centers and stuff like that, like in the middle of Opal and stuff like that. So those two really shaped me. And I remember going to, we went to the Weekly Reader. We had our little Weekly Reader packets where we could pick our books. And I picked this book by George Laycock called Tornadoes, Killer Storms. And it taught me all about the 74 outbreak.
Yeah.
And it had a picture of the cloud, the actual, supercell cloud, and I would sit there and I would trace it, everything from the flanking line to the anvil, to the overshooting tops, to this, to that. I would trace that cloud for hours and hours and hours, because I was so scared of this event. I needed to understand it to get past that. I'm one of those people that I just have to know. So that's what happened to me. But to be honest with you, Justin, and the math requirement, I don't think people understand for FSU meteorology. Meteorology majors actually at FSU take more math probably than math majors do, because they get to double minor in art history or whatever. Meteorology majors at the time were required to double minor in physics and mathematics. In addition to all the meteorology courses, I was not strong in math. So that quickly hit a wall when I was in college. Meteorology was my declared major. That was always my dream. I hit a wall with that in college, and I was like, I can't do this. I'm only through trigonometry. I have to be through calc with analytic geometry 3 to even get in this program. It's going to take me so many years.
Yeah.
So what I did was I would take electives, like I took weathercasting at FSU. I would do whatever I could. Eventually went to law school because my family said the second best thing I was good at was arguing. So my mother worked for a federal judge. So I went to law school. That was natural. But I couldn't. Then the 2000 outbreak happened. The Valentine's Day outbreak happened that hit Grady County and Camillus so hard around us. All our Georgia counties border us. So, and that really hurt me, and I wanted to go back. So I went to the National Weather Service, and I met Bob Gorey. We just sadly lost him, one of the best ever. And I talked with him, and I took all the spotter testing stuff, and he's like, you're a little advanced at this, and because I was like, I've been studying it my whole life. So he actually recommended me for an internship with the Weather Channel, and I got a phone call one day. And look, I grew up watching Terry Smith and all these people on the Weather Channel. So I get a phone call one day, and this is back in the old day where you have your black phone that has the number on it, and it said Smyrna, Georgia. And I was like, whoa. And I answered it, and it was her voice. And I recognized her voice because I've been watching her on TV. And she offered me the internship. Sadly, I had to turn that. It was under Stu Ostro too. I had to turn that down because I was in law school, and financial aid would only cover law related courses, not that. So, so what I started doing then was interning with, I was distraught. My mother's like, you are never going to forgive yourself if you don't go, and I started interning with local stations, WTWC under Mike Rucker, and WCTV at so briefly.
So I want to kind of circle back to a couple of synchronicities here. First of all, Terry Smith and I were classmates at Florida State.
I love it.
Also struggled mightily with math. Kate hit the day before my birthday.
Okay.
Yeah, and Elena, I was moving into an apartment when Elena was hitting Tallahassee and was literally moving furniture up the outside stairs to my apartment with 60 and 70 mile per hour winds blowing through Tallahassee at the time, back in 1985. Kate and Elena, those storms, it's indelible for the residents of Tallahassee. It's pretty amazing, actually.
It really is. And Elena couldn't make up her mind. She scared us all for weeks, before she finally decided where she wanted to go. We were all like, but I think that, shaped it. And I got to a point where, thankfully we had online programs come up like Mississippi State and stuff, not at that math level. I mean, I'm not going to say I don't have to, do synoptic meteorology, and I didn't have to do all those fun, equations and things. I just had to know what they meant, and if I had to, but you guys were on a differential equations level. So that was a little different.
Well, but I mean, the thing about the Mississippi State program that I've come to really appreciate is that it takes people who have just a tremendous desire and a tremendous interest, and you kind of mine down a little deeper in some of the knowledge. They've actually beefed up, their program to where it challenges you some with calculation and with understanding what's going on inside the variables of meteorology, and for a while, from the mid to late 80s, stopped way short. But I think in the 2000s and beyond, it's definitely beefed up. And it brought so many people into the world of broadcast meteorology, and who have become successful. So I applaud you, because again, you said you were in law school at the time, right?
Yeah, I was in law school at the time. And then I finished law school. Yeah, I enrolled in Mississippi State while I was in law school back in 2000, but I that didn't last long. Law school was too much. And these were in the days where Mississippi State's like mailing you the VHS tapes.
That's
You
right.
know, like
That,
we're not doing this all online stuff. Either so, but law school was too much. So I was like, okay, I got to step back and I got to finish one thing before I finish the other. And got through the bar exam and stuff, but it just and let it be a story to others of what your passion really is. Not that I don't love law. I love law. I love being able to do that and courts of law and stuff, but weather was always my primary passion. I think I let subjects like math scare me away, so but it's
yeah,
doable. It's doable.
there's a different level of math and physics in meteorology that is for sure like at a different plane of thinking. But that's all right. That's all right. So a law career begins, and I'm guessing that you were based in Tallahassee with your law career.
Yes, I was. I was based in Tallahassee. I was a prosecutor here for our circuit for a couple of years and then went into civil law. I was doing class actions, all kinds of fun stuff.
Yeah.
I've done pretty much everything you can imagine, every area of law, and did that for, years and years and years. But then another event again happened, the 2017 happened. And
Right.
then, Michael, definitely.
Yeah.
And I was like, I have to finally pursue that. I can't, this has always been my dream. This is what I want to do. So I'm going to do it and, stuck to it. So yeah,
Awesome.
here I
Yeah.
am. Here I
Because
am.
you had to deal with Hurricane Hermine, I guess, in 2016.
Yes.
And then the tornado outbreak was the next year, and then Michael was the next year, and
Yes.
then there was, obviously the string of Irma and Maria and all the ones that were coming through the state of Florida. So at that point, I mean, it's like your trajectory into the broadcast end of meteorology ramped up because of these weather events, but it couldn't have come at a more important time because you were able to get information out to people who may not have otherwise have gotten it. So that timing for you at that time seems to be perfect.
Yeah, it was perfect. It was, I know. And then Tallahassee had the tornadoes in 2019. And I remember I was by myself that night doing a live. And I had three cells come out at one time, one in Grady County, one in Leon, and one in Wakulla.
Yeah.
And, the velocity in Wakulla was screaming at me. And I'm like focusing on Wakulla because I'm by myself and I'm trying, and God bless you, because you were like, Danielle, the CC just dropped on the Tallahassee cell. And I was like, whoa, wait a minute. And, that's an EF3. I'm just like, but thankfully, minimal damage compared to if it had been 10 miles to the west downtown. Unfortunately, like we've had to deal with this year, with the two that hit back in
That's
May.
right.
So it's been back to back to back to back to back to back. So
And it's an amazing cycle because for so many years, that area of North Florida, it was somewhat, you'd have your storms, but as far as tropical weather or even tornadoes,
mhm.
it wasn't that yearly thing where there was another big event coming in. And now recently with the, down toward the northeastern corner of Appalachia Bay with the hurricanes, obviously with Milton and with Helene and the year before that. So obviously you've got your hands full with just keeping up with those things. So from on a day-to-day basis, um, you have the online presence, the southeastern, remind me, southeastern severe,
Southeastern area severe weather. Yes, we
southeastern
post
area
this stuff.
severe weather. And
Yeah, and I will go live on there if I need to, or on radio stations whatever's happening at the time. Southeast area severe weather has a high following in Dothan and our southeastern Alabama counties because we
yeah,
cover all counties that National Weather Service Tallahassee covers. So yeah, we'll cover that, and then sometimes with the radio stations, yeah, like I'll get a call from, Greg from the Greg Tish show in the morning. And he'll be like, okay, I'm going into the station. I'm going to ride this out and we're going to talk. Because here's one thing that was very important to me about radio. When the night Hurricane Kate hit, we had nothing except radio. I mean, we didn't have smartphones. We didn't have trees are falling everywhere. You just keep hearing them fall. We had
Right.
had a lot of rain before Kate, so they were like really just uprooting and hitting everywhere. And I'm a little girl and I'm scared. And so we had, we had radio. We had a meteorologist on radio to talk us through the night and say, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. And you want to be that voice for people. You want to let people know, hey, hunker down. Let's get through this and it's going to be okay. We're going to get through it. So, once we get everybody out of the way and get them to heat evacuations and all the things we have to get through there. But
I remember,
I love being that voice.
remember being in my small apartment. And so I lived down on that Franklin Boulevard area next to Park
Oh,
Avenue in a very small apartment. Now, that didn't flood there. The summertime thunderstorms were much worse, but there was no power. And I was up at the FSU campus while the hurricane was coming in, and we watched all the power flashes with the tornado that was out on the west end out toward Tharp Street. And eventually it was like, there's not much more. The power's out. Everybody's just sort of dispersed because all the meteorology students were up there, just having a moment, if you will, in the midst of Hurricane Kate. And so I went back to my apartment, and there's no power. The only light that was on the east side of Tallahassee was from what used to be called Barnett Bank. And Barnett Bank was a tall bank and had a giant sign. Its green part had flown off, but the fluorescent lights behind it were still on. So the entire east side of Tallahassee was lit up with these giant fluorescent lights. And this was probably midnight on the 21st going into the 22nd. And the only thing that I had that I could listen to was my little NOAA weather radio, because everything, I had no power.
everything was gone. Yeah.
And so on a battery power, I was listening to the weather radio just on, it's just on loop of the reports. And that's all you could listen to was, for me anyway, that's all I could listen to. And I think back on how surreal a moment that was. And that not knowing just how many trees came down and the power that was out for weeks for some.
Yeah.
And that was, again, just sort of a memory from Hurricane Kate. The next day I said, you know what, I'm just going to have to go back to my home, which was up in Georgia at the time, and find a hot shower, because I knew it was going to be a while before we got electricity back. But
we drove to Dothan, because we didn't have power for 2 weeks, so we drove to Dothan because where my family's from for hot showers. It was a rough 2 weeks, but it was also, I got to give this. You did not have a stranger in your neighborhood after that event. No. You did not. We were all out cooking out together, food that was going to go bad in the freezer and stuff, hanging out, actually having to talk and get to know one another. It was wonderful.
I can attest to that with Michael. My next door neighbor was a retired and was fishing every day in the Gulf. So he had a freezer full of fish and scallops. And so obviously without any electricity, all he could do was cook his fish, and he would deep fry it in the backyard. And then one night after Hurricane Michael, power's out, we were out for a long, long time. The neighbor's son comes over and he's got a plate of fried grouper and hush puppies and French fries.
There you go.
You don't get it. Well, the best meal you could possibly imagine. After having a couple of MREs, that was a really good plate of food. But it was that neighbor thing, it's like we're going to take care of each other. And definitely neighborhoods come together after storms like that. So as you talked about the influence as a small child with that feeling in '85 of with the hurricanes, and then that passion's there. And so that's rooted in your desire to kind of get into some way to be an on-air broadcast meteorologist, to at least to alert, inform, and prepare people, and then give a daily forecast. Obviously, that's your job on a radio station. And on top of that, you have a legal career, but that's not your only job, because you also work in the world of sports radio. And
yes.
I'd love to talk
something good.
This year, probably not the greatest year, but I'd love to talk to you a little bit about how that came about and how you work all that into the rest of your what I think would be a fairly busy schedule.
Yeah, that actually came about from my first radio station that I started to work for, WAKU 94.1 here, at Wave 94. And Doug Apple, our station manager, came to me one day and he said, I have this interview scheduled with James Brown of NFL Today. Do you want to take it? And I'm like, are you kidding me? Yes, please. And then he had another one with Coach Bowden. And he said, "Do you want to take this?" And I hadn't seen Coach Bowden since I was a little girl. I didn't even know if he was going to remember me, because my dad was working the field. But I was like, yes. So that kind of opened doors at that point, because I started doing those interviews, and it was my station manager just saying, "Hey, I got this interview scheduled. You're doing weather. You want to do some sports?" And I'm like, "Sure, why not? Let's go." So it just, and then I met up with a former player, and we started a show, and it was great stuff. It was fun times. So
I love, and I've listened to it online. I've listened to some of the episodes, but what I love, or what I've loved, what has come out of that, or came out of that, was your sort of community outreach from that program. That
mhm.
you turned that into a uh, more than just talking about sports. It was about helping people, and I found that to be really inspiring. And forgive me for not knowing this. Do you still work in that venue with that former player?
Oh, with James, we are
Yes.
actually talking about starting to do our show back, because I finally did. He got really busy too, because he is now a coach over in Jacksonville. He got busy with that too, and then he also does news over there. So because he's in Jacksonville, but no, the we call it MFTK, Mentors for the Kids Foundation, 501(c)(3). That is still going on, and it all
Nice.
started with that class, that we got tickets for and took, that wrote the nice letters to Coach Taggart. So that is still going on. It has actually grown exponentially. James now does book bag drives, where he gives away free book bags full of supplies and stuff. And every year we have drive through centers in Orlando. He has them in Orlando, Tallahassee, and Jacksonville, and food distribution as well. So yeah, it's actually taken off, even when we both had to kind of like step back, because he has his own show over there too. And I was like, okay, I got some things I need to focus on. So it became more of an every now and then, but we have been talking about starting the show back up, because I think everybody needs to hear from us now a little bit.
So the people who are watching this podcast at this time, we are both Florida State football aficionados.
Mhm.
My memory goes back to when my hometown football hero Ron Simmons came to Florida State, and followed his career there, and it opened the door to in my eyes to, hey, FSU. Growing up in Georgia, there was UGA, Georgia Tech, and that's about it. And so when Ron Simmons came to Florida State, who was an All-American there as a defensive tackle, um, I was like, oh, Florida State's that's a pretty neat looking school. And then as I began to be interested in, I'm going to follow my passion in meteorology, FSU was like, oh, seemed like a no-brainer, obviously. So I've been
Yep.
following FSU football and FSU sports forever, and I know that you have, because of your connection as an early on with your dad, and
Mm.
as a on-field Florida Highway Patrolman escort for Coach Bowden.
Yes.
So we have a mutual passion for Florida State football,
Yes.
and this conversation happens during a season which many are passionate about, but perhaps the wrong reasons. Um, but if I'm going to ask you this. I know this is supposed to be about weather, but what do you love about Florida State football? I mean, there's an interesting angle to everybody's passion, but yours goes back a ways. But what is it that always drives you about FSU football?
The legacy, just the legacy, the history, the legacy, being around those players growing up, and Coach Bowden, having such, he came here, the year I was born, and what he managed to accomplish, and the fact that it's his legacy. Still on that field. I mean, even with new coaches and everything we have, it's the legacy. I mean, for me, it's deeply rooted in that, and just our relationship with the Seminole tribe. I love that. I love so many things that Florida State does. I love so many things that you know. We're not playing very well right now, but I'm gonna leave that alone. I'm
Well,
just
you know, someone, I believe a writer on one of the FSU blogs or sites was comparing recent teams that are doing extremely well this year and then said, here's what they did last year. And they were all of these teams that are doing really well, like undefeated, like Indiana, had awful years last year. So he said, well, there's hope. You never know in these days and age what you can do has been the case with transfers and things like that. I know we're into football right now. I live currently in West Virginia, and West Virginia is home to both Nick Saban and Jimbo Fisher, among other notoriously well-represented coaches throughout the years. And Jimbo was at one time, obviously, our Florida State head coach. There's always talk, whenever I talk to anybody up here, it's like, hey, is Jimbo coming back? Or it's like, I don't know. He seems to be content at where he's at. But anyway, we have wandered off into football, but
it's hard. Look, hey, when me around, it's going to happen. I promise. It's just because you're such a big fan too. I know you are. So I completely understand.
So my general manager asked me who's my favorite FSU football player of all time. And, I said it was Work Done. And he was like, what? It's not Dion? I said, well, he's top 10. But for me,
Right.
and when Work Done just came to mind, and I've known, players, played golf with Brad Johnson, played golf with Casey Weldon. When I lived in Tallahassee, I've got these personal connections with football players. But that came to pop to mind, and he mentioned Deion Sanders. I'm like, oh yeah, he's good.
Yeah. Well, sorry, forgot about him. No, I'm with you. Mine's actually Dexter Carter, and everybody everybody's like, I'm like, you don't understand. These were the days where this little firecracker was making Miami's life miserable, and we needed that. So, that's my answer on that.
I suppose if we'd had this conversation last year when FSU was undefeated, it'd probably have a different tone. But
it's just amazing. Hope. 13-0 to 1 and okay.
So we'll get back to weather. A lot of questions that I have sometimes go into like personal preferences. So if you could pick a season, what would be your favorite weather season?
We have seasons in Florida?
Well, okay, that's a good answer. That's an excellent answer.
It's gonna be it's hard toss up between spring and fall. Yeah. I love spring because I don't know, there's just this certain part around springtime Tallahassee, ironically, where everything just turns neon green and it's just so beautiful, and and things start blooming, azaleas. And then we get that final freeze, that takes them all out. But the one that sneaks up on you. But I love fall too. It's just, we're just not having one right now.
No.
I'm forecasting highs of 86, 87. And I'm like, our average is 77. So yeah. Don't feel like we're having much of one right now.
I think the pattern's going to shift in a couple of weeks. So I think
it is too. We're going to do this La Nina thing, which also that makes me. I'm one of the weird ones that get nervous about La Nina with severe weather outbreaks. Now and everybody, in the beginning when I first started, this was back in 2000, they were like, oh no, El Nino is worse on Florida. Yeah, on South Florida. True. But North Florida can get caught in this South Georgia tornado outbreak stuff too. And I've seen a lot of those be La Nina years. So
it's great to, and taking analog years like that. And then, and then sort of correlating to the La Nina event that's going on now, and seeing how that maps out, because it's easy to say, well, it's La Nina, it's going to be warm and dry, but there are these one-off events that happen during La Nina years that's super critical to kind of look back and look at analog years. I think that's an awesome point for residents of North Florida, South Georgia, Southeast Alabama. La Nina is not always exactly the same. Every La Nina is not the same. Like
it is not the same. It can be completely different. And part of what we did try to do was Southeast area severe weather. And now I'm actually talking with Craig. He's well known on Twitter. He has a PhD from Mississippi State. Part of his project is to get tornado shelters open across all states, everywhere. And I think that's very important. We used to work on that. We would have to call them safe havens instead of storm shelters, because the FEMA red tape and all that stuff we got to deal with. But you're dealing, it's kind of like the NOAA Project Vortex Southeast study, where they highlighted the problems with these outbreaks in the Southeast. And they're scary in the sense they're nocturnal, usually it's happening overnight. I know Adele was that case, most definitely. So was the 2000 outbreak with Camilla and Grady County. And they're very fast moving, and they're in high population density areas, and a lot of these people live in mobile homes. And that's our worst fear, is a tornado at 3 a.m. And I don't know, you just have to get out of there. You can't stay there. And that's the most horrifying thing to tell somebody, is you have to leave your home. So it would be better if we could get them in shelters ahead of time before that happens, but that's a goal.
I have followed that project. I think it's the initiative is awesome, and I know that people who live sort of in rural areas that don't have like direct access to a shelter, if you will,
Yes.
or they're in a mobile home community, and there's nowhere to go. Where do you
Nowhere to go.
go? And but you can't stay in your mobile home. I mean, it's obvious that is like, when you see the pictures of tornadoes as they go through special rural towns, it's these mobile home communities that seem, it's every place gets impacted, but you can't stay there. So that initiative of getting these shelters, these places to go that are safe, I think is great. And I'm glad that you're partnering with him. I've definitely followed him online as well.
Yeah, so I've been talking to him about how we can help manage to better accomplish this, because a lot of my focus has been outside of Michael and stuff, has been working on those tornado outbreaks that pop up that do these things, especially like I said, La Nina years sometimes scare me with that, and I've talked with the victims, and I talked with Mr. Harrell, who lost his wife and daughter in Grady County in 2000 during the Valentine's Day outbreak, and he had every plan to leave. I mean, he was weather savvy. He was weather aware. He was watching Mike McCall on TV all night. He knew. And then when it got to the point where the warning was issued, he opened the front door and it blew him back in. And so he grabbed his wife and daughter. And at that point, what do you do? And he's like, and you're trying to get in a hallway at that point. Well, in a double wide hallway, that's the seam that it's going to, that's what's going to break first. So, and it, I talked to him, and that broke my heart. And then hearing the stories that came out of Adele, like Alexis Livingston, who was thrown, she had just come home right before moving to Florida on a soccer scholarship, and was staying the night there at her parents' house. And
wow.
Yeah, I mean, stuff like that. Like I talked to those people because it helped, I want to help fix this, for other people that can be in a situation where, if a PDS tornado watch is issued or something like that, we have a place for you to go. And I think some communities are getting better about it. I think others aren't.
Right.
So
That,
I think Tornado Alley is kind of shifting. I mean, a little. I think that I know that's a huge debate, but I agree. I've seen more F5s, EF5s in Birmingham throughout my lifetime than I have probably anywhere else. So besides Oklahoma,
the 2011, outbreak was, that rivaled the 74 outbreak for sure. Yeah. And you just, at some point, definitely Tornado Alley is shifting. I think the Dixie Alley is becoming more of a reality. I mean, it's definitely a reality, but it's becoming more concrete in fact with year upon year upon year with the numbers. I mean, in West Virginia, where I'm at, we've had the most ever in 1 year.
Wow.
I mean, out of the National Weather Service office out of Charleston, the most warnings they've ever issued, and the most confirmed tornadoes ever in 1 year. And some of that has to do with technology, with better radar, with more people with phones that can document, hey, look at this. And so then they can go out and do a storm survey and actually confirm the tornado. But regardless of that, the activity up here this year has, especially from April on, has been remarkable. And Pittsburgh as well, which is another Weather Service office in our television market, they had numerous tornadoes coming through the western PA and northern sections of West Virginia back in the spring.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, is Tornado Alley shifting? I think there's concrete evidence for that.
Yeah, I do too. I do too. And then we have all the hurricanes on top of it. So it's been, and it's been one of those situations where it's just, and it's heartbreaking because you try to explain it. And I have a rule with my viewers. I will not, and I don't want, and they know me well enough to know if I'm not talking about it, then there's nothing going on right now. If I'm not mentioning it, I'm not going to post a GFS model run 15 days out. Will never be that kind of person. If I'm not talking about it, then I want you to know that there's nothing going on. Now they know also that I have my beer and spam rule. My beer and spam rule is famous. It's known because that is the first thing you will see pop up when a hurricane warning is issued for this area. If you go in Walmart, they literally have spam on display, like in the display things, along with beer. That's their hurricane supplies. I guess other people do milk and bread for snowstorms. We do beer and spam for hurricanes. So people will say, Danielle, is it beer and spam time? That because they did it with Hermine. That when I walked into Walmart, I was like, wow, you guys got ready quick. So they know that's my rule. And they'll say, is it beer and spam time? And I'll say yes, and they know I'm serious. And that's earning their trust is everything to me because I need them to understand when I'm saying this is serious and you got to get out of there. If, with evac orders or, if you're a friend in a mobile home and there's a PDS tornado watch that night for an area, you got to go stay somewhere else till this is over. That's just a no-brainer. So I earning their trust and having their trust with that. You just got to I keep a sense of humor with it. I have to, just to make them laugh because it gets so serious and it gets so scary.
Yeah.
And I'll just be like, y'all, it's beer and spam time. So let's go. So,
and because if you don't have sort of that next level of intensity, and if it's beer and spam, obviously that's a level of intensity. There may be a bit of a humor edge to it, but it's like, hey, y'all take this serious.
yeah, that means,
this is at, because like you said, there's too many when you're online and you're seeing these posts that are 10 or 15 days out. For people who have lived through multiple major hurricanes lately, and they're online, and all of a sudden they see someone post something that's 15 days away. The PTSD part of that, the reaction internally when you've just lived through it, or not even even if it's been 4, 5, 6 years, there is a responsibility as a meteorologist, wherever your broadcast venue, if it's just on a computer and you're posting it up on X, you do have a responsibility to consider that. And I like the fact that you said, if I'm not talking about it, then it's okay. When I start talking about it, you start paying attention. I think that's great.
Yeah, and you brought up such a good point because you were one of the ones most definitely, and Michael didn't even hit here. What you guys went through was absolutely just gut wrenching awful. But I was down there for days and weeks after, and I saw. So I went through Calhoun, I went through Washington, I went through Bay, I went through Gulf County, Jackson, all of them. And it was so, and you brought it up to me one night. I remember you were on a post and you said, Danielle, you'll have PTSD just from seeing that. I wasn't realizing that myself, that I felt that way, that I was literally felt like I had PTSD just from what I saw, and not much less living through it. So that is the last thing any meteorologist wants, is for our viewers to feel that way, for somebody to share something and scare, especially after this year, after Helene, and what that has done. We have a responsibility, not to be those people. We have a responsibility. That is a soapbox I will get on, because I will get really upset. I will get really upset about it.
Because I know that immediately following Helene, or perhaps immediately following Milton, I think it was immediately after Milton, someone took some graphic, some image that was an old Helene track, rebranded it as like, oh, here comes the next hurricane out of the Gulf of Mexico, put it up online, and it can't be just to get clicks. I can't imagine that. Maybe it is. I'm not sure, but I can't imagine anybody who would be that sort of superficial and also with no depth of character to go, I don't care what people think. I'm going to put this out here and just to get clicks. It just doesn't seem, that seems incongruent to
Yeah.
common folk. But I know that being in North Florida and having to deal with these most recent hurricanes, something like that just must really, really irritate you, or
It
maybe worse.
irritates me. It irritates me because I know there is still so much PTSD from Michael. We all know that. Now from Helene, definitely. I mean, I'm talking with my friends down in Pinellas County. I can't even. This is just still horrible. And then North Carolina, we haven't even gotten to that.
Right.
How absolutely just that those stories just break my heart. So I mean, you talk about that, and then Milton, and you have a responsibility to report accurately to them what's going on. Yes, the NHC says 40% chance of development. If I even post that orange blob, everybody's going to get all scared and upset.
I agree with that.
Yeah, but you have to put it with context and say, listen, but this time of year, this is what usually happens, or there's shear here, or there's this there, and it's not the kind of, because Michael was a completely different situation. I know it scares everybody when stuff comes out of those areas, the Bay of
Yes.
Campeche and then the Caribbean. It scares us. It scared me with Opal when I was a child. I was in college. Come on, might as well have been a child compared to now. But, I went to bed to a 2 and woke up to a 5, and all heck was breaking loose. And they were mass evacuating Apalachicola, only for Panama City then to have
Yeah.
to get evacuated. And that was a nightmare. And
Yeah.
so, all that was happening.
And there was a jog late with Opal
Mm-hmm.
that put Pensacola and that area in the Western Panhandle that had no forewarning on that. Well, I say no, but it was middle of the night, and everybody's like, "Well, we got to get out," and they were stuck on the interstate, running
Yeah,
out of
because we'd
gas.
already been, it's terrible.
Yeah.
But here's the reality, and I hate to say this because, gosh, please forgive me. Tallahassee, I think largely they're thankful, but besides the tornadoes this year, I think they largely feel spared because, okay, even with Michael, had Michael taken one jog at the coast and gone into Apalachicola, let's talk about the Tallahassee would look like a completely different city.
You're right.
And many areas would. That didn't happen, and then you saw this wild thing Helene did, and then you had last year it was Adelia, and it's like,
Yeah.
but I know the worst fear was always something coming up through Wakulla County, and then the storm surge potential of the Big Bend is just insane. And when I saw was it Helene, the potential of the storm surge coming through Wakulla County on the eastern side, all the way up into southern Leon County, where we don't even border. We're not even on the Gulf,
Right.
at all. But now you just put us there.
Right.
That was terrifying to me. But that's also been, cannot find that study. There was a study I think the National Weather Service did years ago, or somebody with them, of what would be the worst case scenario if a Category 5 did pop up.
Right.
And hit that area directly. And yeah, you would face storm surge of that magnitude. Wakulla County is pretty much flat as it can be anyway. So,
well, I remember it was years ago, and I don't remember the storm. Usually I'm pretty good at keeping up with which storm it was. But I recall St. Mark's, which is a small town on the coastline near in Wakulla County. And it was a tropical storm, if I recall. And it pushed 9 or 10 feet of water up the St. Mark's River and inundated that whole area. And wasn't even a hurricane. If I recall, it wasn't even a hurricane.
Yeah, that's that kind of stuff happens. So yeah, I mean, to say that Adelia and Helene and and even Michael, and I hate to say it, I mean, I don't want to wish it on y'all, for us to get saved, but I think Tallahassee largely feels kind of spared it so far. But eventually luck does run out, and that's something we have to. Eventually.
Right. The odds and the repeat of storms like that, because it was from what 05 to 16, almost 11 years without a landfalling hurricane in the state of Florida. So
wow.
I think now I think everything's leveling out. We could go back to that The
Do we have
hurricane.
to make up for it all at
Yeah,
once? Like, is it
we could go back
necessary?
to the hurricane drought for sure. Yeah, I've got a brother who lives over in extreme South Walton County, over toward the Destin area,
Mhm.
and he's retired. And as soon as something pops, like even at the Cape Verde Islands in Africa, he's like texting me, "Hey, what do you think about this one?" I'm like, because he realizes that it's going to take so much to get, they've got two dogs, and it's just going to take a lot to get out of that area he lives in. And where they're going to evacuate. And he's always like, "Do you think I should go north or west or east?" I'm like, "Jim, just hold still for a little bit and see what happens."
Just a little bit. We get with the peninsula though. We can only let people get so far because, and that's one of the things. A lot of people I know would come home and nothing happened, and they're everybody's inconvenienced. We only have two major ways to get you out of there. There, I mean, we have 75 and 95. So, they will issue evacuations a little bit earlier on that area than they probably will for us. But
Yeah,
it's one
that's
of
true.
those situations where it's like the sooner you can get out, get out. My worst fear is having people gridlocked during a storm on an
Yeah,
interstate. It
yeah.
scares me bad.
I agree with you 100% on that.
100% on that.
Um, so we've talked a little bit about hurricanes and other things. So, and I asked you about your favorite season, and I'm going to ask you a particular question. What is your favorite weather event? Well, I mean, like meteorologically or just personally, what do you like best? A sunny day in about 75, or do storms have your passion?
I'm gonna have to say storms have my passion. They also, I'm still, and I think that's one of the things, for people that get into this because they had some kind of an event in their life that scared them. I mean, that the tornado I was in '85 was only an EF0, but it scared me. And then Kate hit right after. I'm still scared of them in a way, but not in the way, you know what I'm saying?
Yep.
I understand them now, and I understand them from upper levels to lower levels and what it takes, but I still respect them a whole lot. So yeah, it's kind of odd. I'd have to go with thunderstorm. I'll prefer a summer afternoon one as
There you
opposed to
go.
like a
Yeah.
cold front coming through in
Come and go in
December.
about 30 minutes, and when it's done, the sun comes back out, and everything's fine, right?
Yeah, that kind of thunderstorm. But I do love a good thunderstorm. I do, just not with tornadoes and
Yeah.
all that
Um,
stuff.
I might have to agree with you on that. So you've got 4 or 5, 6 full-time jobs, it sounds like.
It feels like.
And obviously, knowing you and following you, you've got a full-time family as well.
Yes.
I guess the challenge is there of balancing family life and work life. What's your key to success on that?
Extremely hard. I have 5 children. 2 are in college and moved out. And now I have my oldest daughter. She's still here, and then my second youngest daughter. She actually was afraid of thunderstorms for a while. She's 13, so I started involving her. And because they see me pull the all-nighters, like they'll see me, up all night checking the warnings, checking the radar, posting things and stuff like that. They'll see me pull those. So what I'd say, for anybody that feels that way, involve them, talk to them, hey, come look at this and tell me what you think, and or just stuff like that. And and so now she's getting really into it, and I'm starting to see, I'm like, you're gonna end up being a meteorologist. I can tell. So yeah, it's hard to balance it, especially when it's hard to balance it. I mean, I've had all-nighters I've had to pull with law for cases and stuff.
Yeah.
Weather's just a little more frequent these days. So, but you know what it's like. You don't get to sleep and you have to stay awake, and it's an all-nighter, and it's
Yeah.
this and it's that. And yeah, so that's hard to balance because then you got to get back up and you still got to be mom. So
Wow. Yep.
it is.
Yep.
It is hard.
So, coffee or energy drink? What's your caffeine of choice?
I used to love Avocare Spark. I'm not a coffee person. I like stuff with vitamins and stuff. So
Yeah.
my daughter's got me on this Celsius now, but it makes me too jittery. I know
Okay.
it's like overtaking the country. Everybody
It is.
loves Celsius. And I'm just like,
You would think a drink with a weather name in it would be good for you, but
it would be good for you. It just makes me, I can't have that much jolt of caffeine. You've got to ease me in. So maybe I should go back to coffee. I just haven't, I've never been a coffee person. It's weird. So
So So looking back at your life, obviously you've got all these sort of, it's like a stair step of it's not like a meteor career, and it's not like it's sort of stair stepped its way through. If you could unplug yourself right now and go back to, just out of high school, Danielle, what would your advice be there? Like, how would you mentor yourself as a teenager if for a career?
Follow your calling, do what you want to do, because the events that we are talking about that get us into this business, they never go away. And it's a passion, it's an obsession, it'll never go away, and no other career is going to take its place. I'm telling you. I
Hmm.
would tell myself, do it no matter what it takes. It may take you 7 years to get a bachelor's degree because you're going to have to get through calc with analytic geometry 3. But
Right.
but do it anyway. I'm thankful for Mississippi State, and like I said, you're gonna do math there too, just not FSU. Y'all are I'm like, it's kind of scary. But I would tell me not to be afraid, to follow my dream, to follow my calling. That's what I wanted to do. And there was a lot of, there's always that pressure from that family member. Oh, you ain't gonna make no money at that. That's Wake up doing what you love to do. Don't wake up for that. That's not. I would counsel myself that.
Yeah,
So
that way when you put your feet on the floor, you know where you're going to be walking. And I think that's a great way to
yep.
to talk about that. So with everything going on, what's next? You got any big plans? I know you mentioned maybe that you're hooking back up with your former sports radio partner, but is everything just steady state like you're doing, or do you have some other?
Everything's just steady state like I'm doing. Working on law cases and doing recording nightly for Panama City and Tallahassee. And then if something happens, I'm trying to get set back up to be able to go live more during events, because now I do realize people aren't using radio anymore like we were. If we tell them to get in their interior room and all that stuff, they've got their smartphones so they can hear us, and and definitely give them a voice and give them stuff. So trying to get because I kind of stopped doing that at a point. Just because it was the whole thing with our text alert service, which was what was driving the bus the most. And we loved it. The company wanted to pass the cost onto our followers, and we had thousands, and that we're sending them out to, and we were quick. Like, the bot from the National Weather Service would come out, and we would copy paste, hit Henry County or Houston County or Leon County or whatever, and it's out. And my friends were like, I got your warning 15 minutes before. So our lead time was great, but
Yeah,
then we got to the point where they were taking the cost out on the subscribers.
yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah,
Well,
that didn't make me happy. So I need to get back to
yeah,
going live and helping with more. But like I said, it's hard when you're by yourself sometimes, because like you saved me that night, because when you said that, when you like, Danielle, the CC just dropped. I'm
well,
like, I'm focused on Wakulla.
yeah,
Grady County is happening too, which is literally bordering my house. And then, we have the first EF3 in Tallahassee since 1940. I forgot 40 what.
yeah. It was.
So
You're right, late 40s. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
some.
And at the time, I was living a couple of hours away, but I was following what you're doing because I still had relatives living in the
Mm.
Tallahassee area, so I was trying to keep up with that at the same time. And I was just looking at my radar, going, "Ooh,
Oh,
I won't do
yeah,
it."
and I'm down here talking about velocity in Wakulla, which ended up being EF0. So,
Well,
like, it
but
is hard because
you're
you
you're
you
doing
do
great work.
need. Thank you. But
Yeah,
you definitely do. And I love that about, all you guys, with the broadcast meteorology side, the TV side, you guys do. You call teams in. Like, you have teams there that, are helping. You'll
yeah.
see y'all on air, and somebody will hand you a warning, or you'll be like, okay, this just popped up or something like that. And so it is hard. It is hard when
But
you're.
when you're by yourself, absolutely, because you don't, like you said, if things are popping, if you will, it's hard to keep up with everything. So I was glad to help. I'm glad that that
Thank
helped
you.
get
Well,
you
this
some.
year was worse too, because we had three literally, like, and two headed towards
Oh yeah,
downtown Tallahassee, and then converging over downtown Tallahassee. And I'm like, it's always rush hour too. This was like getting to be, I think my last radar shot was like 6 something in the morning. And I'm like, people are getting on the roads to go to work. Same with afternoon thunderstorms. I mean, it's always,
Yeah.
it's something we do. So,
But so fascinating is not the word, it's inspiring. The fact that you've been able to, you've got this passion for weather, you have all of these sort of things going on that both drive you and move you forward. You keep momentum, family life that has to be a lot to handle. But you're still like passionate about making sure that people hear a warning or some sort of an alert. So I appreciate that out of you. I really do.
well, thank you. I do. I mean, I appreciate you saying that because it's a huge part. And my friends used to, during tornado outbreaks and stuff, they would be so funny. Even if it was in a different area, because we covered the panhandle too. And they're like, her phone's going to be going off all night. Because I have it set to where only I'm going to get those notifications from the National Weather Service. So
Right.
you won't hear anything else if my phone's going ding, ding, ding. And Eden's like, my daughter Eden's like, what in the world? I'm like, those are just the climate reports coming in. They do them back to back to back to back. So I'm like, I promise it's not 18 tornado warnings.
Yeah, it's not bad weather. That's Well,
So
it's been a joy catching up with you, Danielle. I really appreciate your time today. Next time we talk, FSU will be doing much better in football, I'm
thank
sure.
you. Amen. Please, please. I don't know if we can get much worse. So it's gotta be. It's gotta be.
But again,
So
keep doing what you're doing. You're helping out the people of North Florida, South Georgia, Southeast Alabama. I think a message not only of hope but of clarity during times of bad weather is a good thing to have, and that's what you provide. And I appreciate that, and I appreciate
thank
you
you.
coming on the podcast project with us today. I really do.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for this project. I think it's wonderful.
No problem at all. I'll get all the links and all the lingo that I'm supposed to talk about locked in on the notes on this thing, and I'll edit it up, we'll publish it up, and get everybody out there knowing about what a great resource that you are for the fine folks of North Florida and that area.
Well, thank you, Justin. I really appreciate it. That means a lot. That means a lot coming from you.
It's
So
been my pleasure to speak with you today. Have a great day, great year, and go
you
Noles.
too. Go Knowles. As
right.
always, go Knowles. All right.
Thanks for watching this episode of the Weather School Podcast Project. To see all the episodes of the podcast project, please visit skool.com/weatherschool/about. Become a member and join the Weather School community.